An original from Story Studio Network.
She's an innovator. He's a problem solver. And they don't rely solely on textbooks. They apply the science of generations of experience. Learn from grandparents who planted the seedlings, leaving a legacy for generations not yet imagined. They nurture nature and can only see the forest for the trees. This podcast series tells their story. Welcome to Forestry Uncut.
Let me ask you a bit of a rhetorical question. What good is a hero if there's no one to save? I mean, really, what would Superman do if the world wasn't constantly in peril and he didn't have the opportunity to swoop in and set everything right again? He'd kind of be a hero with a complex. He'd be a hero without a meaning. And if I back this out into what we're hearing about forestry, it kind of would mean that he's a hero with nowhere to market his remarkable skills. So all of this is because I'm finding it really hard to wrap my head around that I think we all agree that the world absolutely needs saving. You and I would both be hard-pressed to find anyone who would disagree with that statement, right? And forestry, as far as we can tell, logically, can be a hero here. It can swoop in many cases, and do some serious good. So what I'm grappling with is the reality that the world isn't set up to receive help. Because I am the way I am, I need to go to the source of this. I need to meet these heroes to understand. There are hundreds of them in Canada and around the globe. People working tirelessly in the forestry sector to keep it going, to keep innovating, despite the fact that a lot of the world, Nova Scotia, Canada, and other global markets aren't set up to fully receive the help. So Stephen Moore, you'll recall, he's the executive director at Forest Nova Scotia. He and I gathered with Joe Lewis, who is the founder of a company called BioBurn Pros. We also sat down with Joachim Stroink. He's the Chief Government and Global Relations Officer at a company called Sustain Agro. Now, here's how I would describe it. Both of these guys, salt of the earth, down to earth folks who are running companies that easily qualify as startup innovators in the forestry sector. Stephen, as he's known to do, puts it more bluntly.
These are people who are trying to take ideas and turn ideas into technology. Joe and Joachim both have proven technology. These are things that work. But for some reason in this province, we have this real desire to not import things and to build our own thing, despite our track record of not being great innovators. Joachim's technology works. It's been tested. That shows. Joe's technology works. And if you want to talk efficiency, taking wood and using that to produce both heat and electricity is over 95% efficient. We have solutions that don't require retrofitting, don't require you to do something different. You can just pull your truck up to the pump and put Joachim's diesel in it, and it's going to work.
All right, so I'm in. What works? What doesn't? Who are the folks creating the markets? What do they think needs to happen to elevate the forestry sector to where it needs to be? My first question is to Joe. He admits he sort of fell into the business of forestry quite by accident.
You know, after a little bit of military service, I got out and started a small excavation and landscaping company. And I got myself into a lot of land clearing, road building, and stuff like that. So unbeknownst to me, I was becoming a heavy polluter. And what was I doing with the wood waste was often times as a small company, we were selling off whatever we could, obviously, but anything left over, so roots and boughs and all the waste of the wood system that we were moving, we were taking it to the landfills. And, logistically, it was a bit of a nightmare for a new small company to be, loading up pickup trucks with dump trailers and just doing a load at a time out to the landfill. And shortly after that, Hurricane Fiona had actually hit, and it ramped up business for us quite a bit in terms of cleaning up wood waste and bio waste. And it kind of sucked us into the forestry industry unexpectedly. We never realized that we were part of the industry until we wanted to be part of the industry, basically. But in that process, it kind of opened up our eyes to going, oh, wow, there's a lot of waste being produced, not only through natural disasters, but through urban crawl, other forms like that. And so we started looking at it logistically. It's like, okay, how can we do this better as a business? And so we sat down one day and we just started looking at better ways to process wood waste. And in that process, we discovered a new patented technology called air curtain burners. And so I reached out to the province and just said, hey, I've got this thing I've found and this idea, and I think it can not only help us remediate post-disaster, but it seems to tie in great with our climate goals and our waste reduction goals. And then started to realize it kind of fits in several industries, not just forestry, but agriculture and again, the waste industry. So that aha moment was kind of when we got support back from Environment and Climate Change Nova Scotia. To wrap that up, we basically spent 2023 saying, is this a viable business option to implement this technology as a business model? Because typically prior to us, end users with a waste problem were purchasing this technology. So municipalities or lumber mills and things like that. There was no one that really took it to market. So, and we're also the first to bring it to Atlantic Canada.
Oh, Joe, I can relate. Like, being the first to do something often requires a little bit of blind courage. Either that or a solid, unwavering vision for where you want to end up. That second thing is kind of what Joachim told me drove him to help found Sustain Agro. Do you remember how you felt like as a person the day that you realized, like, okay, like the next 10 to 15 years of my life are going to be devoted to this thing because it just feels like the right thing?
I mean, I guess for us, it's more about it's the right thing because we're screwed. Our environment is screwed. And if we don't take initiatives today, we will have no planet. So it's not even a willingness to do this or an all-in. It's a social responsibility to do this. We as a company had to figure out, or we as a group of individuals want to figure out, how do we reduce our carbon footprint as a society, and and what has the bigger impact that's going to be left for our kids and our grandkids. And that was kind of the mindset that we looked at it, myself and Joey O'Brien. And then we built a team around that kind of concept. Where we ended up with Sustain Agro and our technology is much different because we wanted to find what is the solution today, not tomorrow, not hydrogen, not electrification. What is the solution now? And the solution now is our renewable diesel, because we know that we have a negative carbon footprint. So we know that the long story of this is that if you burn our fuel, you're going to have carbon credits and carbon offsets to go with it, with your purchase, and not pay the carbon tax. So economically, we felt that this was the best pathway to make a greater and global impact on using the forest and using byproducts of the forest. But also not alone, we also felt that we're not a one-hit wonder in the sense of we're not just diesel, we're biochar, we're wood vinegar. We also know that our tars that we can pull out of it can be potentially a possibility for asphalt. We know that there's other byproducts that could be lubricants. So that's where the excitement for us came from, but is the added values of products, not just one, not like the pulp and paper industry where it's just paper. We feel that we because we can hit so many different avenues that our carbon is being captured. We can do so many different and positive global initiatives within reducing our GHG footprint.
Lots of P words in what Joachim is saying. Did you hear them? Possibility, potentially, pathway. Now, I'm watching as Joachim is saying this, and Joe is listening intently. And then he brings up another P word, one that we've kind of already talked about in our previous episode, people. But Joe takes this one step further and suggests that for small startups in forestry, this is personal.
That's how I was operating. And through that first business, I discovered this other opportunity, and we decided as a team that, I got, like Joachim, it's all about the team you put around you to see success. So when I saw I could get the right team and get the right support, I said, let's go after this. I actually took a leave of absence from the Coast Guard, which I'm on right now, to pursue this full time. So not only did we spend hundreds of thousands of our own dollars, I also left a well-paying career behind. And, I've got children, I've got a family, I've got community commitments as well. And, we put that all on a bit of the risky side now so we can pursue this. And, none of this is easy, but my God, we're passionate about it. We know where we're going. We're all in. We're not stopping until this is a reality. And as a business owner, I think we can all kind of agree here is it very seldomly comes down to dollars and cents. It's kind of about what you're getting out of bed for and going to bed, happy about at the end of the day. And that bit of personal legacy is like, what do you want to be known for? And now that, Joachim touched on this earlier, and Stephen as well, and, Aaron, I know you have a family. It's all about the next generation, where are we going? And so if I can not only, in this process, I discovered what I was doing and how I can correct my own business, but I also want to correct it for the future of my children. Give them something to be proud that our family legacy is behind an environmental sustainable company that's doing good things.
Stephen, the policy of all of this, because we've heard Joe had interaction with the province and, they were like, oh, gee, you have a solution. We want to go to there. And Joachim has a solution. Oh, gee, you have a solution. We want to go to there. What's the policy story underneath all of this that you're hearing?
I'm trying to think about how I answer that question without sounding completely off the rails, to be perfectly honest. The policy around all of this is horrendously problematic. And I think that's what I would say. You have Joe and Joachim's company, neither of whom have asked for a lick of subsidy from the government of Nova Scotia, presenting opportunities that are going to... Sorry, I thought I had my do not disturb on. Just one second. But whose company? So you have two companies here who are not looking for a cent of government subsidy, looking to invest in our province, looking to help with a noted problem in our province. And it is still very hard for larger projects to get off the ground here. I would love to hear Joachim's experience between different jurisdictions in Canada, let alone his experience here in Nova Scotia. But, this all stems, there are global dynamics at play here, but there are also local dynamics at play. And the massive problems for our sector started with the closure of Northern Pulp. And since Northern Pulp's closure, we've seen the contractor capacity in the province go down by 40%. We've seen the number of buyers of forestry products in the province drop 20%. And in their absence, we have 1.5 at least million tons a year of low-grade waste wood that has nowhere to go, except be left in the woods to dry and become wildfire fuel. And so that number is actually going to grow, because as we start to implement the province's ecological forestry plan, there's going to be more of that low-grade wood, because in certain parts of the forest, all you can do is thin. So we've created a policy that's creating a product that has nowhere to go and has received, if I'm being perfectly honest up to this point, no real attention from government.
It's funny, this morning we had a bit of a directors meeting and we're just talking about where we're at with everything. Trying to build that demand, like I had mentioned, is where we're at today because everyone loves what we have to say. Everyone sees the value in reducing emissions, reducing processes. And there's a lot of great biomass being created through planned projects. And where we really fit is these unplanned events like hurricanes, and mass downfalls or, unexpected events where we can get, okay, maybe the best bet isn't to try to create these markets for this stuff. Maybe the best option is to provide on-site elimination where the byproducts can be biochar, thermal energy. We have a new product coming online called a biocharger, which is going to be basically a battery bank where we can now take heavy equipment in the forestry industry and electrify it. So we don't need fossil fuels in the forest anymore. We can take this battery bank with that into the forest. So we can, there's a lot of great things going on. It's just some of it doesn't quite make sense in reality. To take wood waste and create a market for it, by all means, is a beautiful thing. But some of these markets we've created just don't make sense because we're now emitting more. We're now more processes. We're spending more money. So where does this really land? So, we want to see that we encourage all the right processes that are happening, but we can jump in and say, hey, this is where it stops, and elimination and reduction is the best. So, we're a biomass processing company, but really what we specialize is reduction. We reduce biomass to a biochar, 99%. We reduce processes, we reduce emissions, we reduce capital expenditures.
All those things. Joachim, can you put a dollar figure on this? Because I think what I'm hearing is like the business of bio waste, biofuel, bio XYZ is not, there's no debate that it makes sense scientifically. The value chain is there. It's this getting across, it's articulating the value. And, we can comment till we're blue in the face about how the politicians have decided to try to articulate that value and whether that's been a useful conversation or not. But I know from hearing you at the AGM that in your company, you are actually able to show what that value is for a pocketbook.
Yep. So there's a couple components of that to your statement. The big thing for us is that we base all our financial modeling just on the diesel and a little bit of the biochar. So we know we're revenue positive based on 30 million liters of diesel in production, and then we can scale up from there. We're $500 million to the GDP for every 100 million liters of fuel that's produced here in Nova Scotia. It's 133 jobs. Again, these are mid-level to management jobs. They're reasonable paying jobs. We can go into rural parts of Nova Scotia, Ontario, New Brunswick, where there's struggles for economic development. The other component of this too this has been dawned on me at the AGM, where a gentleman came up to me almost in tears and just said to me, "This is the first time ever in my life, in a very long time, that I can see the future in the forestry sector for my kids." And it's companies like you who are taking biomass and not doing a one-hit wonder with it. And so that story is so fundamentally important, specifically for rural Nova Scotia, is that we are that solution. And the federal government has really put their nose up to us and said, "Your diesel, we're not interested." Right? Even though you buy our diesel, you don't pay carbon tax. Right? So right off the get-go, you're almost paying half of what you're paying at the pumps. So this is a significant dialogue that needs to happen in a very open form, because if we don't have this dialogue, the politicians are going to go to hydrogen. Well, guess what? Hydrogen, the infrastructure that's needed to build hydrogen is astronomical. And the transition from fuel to hydrogen is astronomical when you can hit those negative GHG numbers with a diesel. And diesel is in a truck, and the truck is going to have a negative carbon footprint. That is what we're reaching for. It's just asinine that we can't have that conversation very openly and publicly.
It's wild to me as well. I mean, and you just touched on a few things that I think we've been really exploring throughout this series, is this idea of it really, the story of the forest or of forestry is really of rural economies, and also of developing the foresters of the future are not going to look like my grandfather who was in the woods in the 60s, scaling trees. God love him. He worked his whole life. He loved the bush. But, when my kids decide to go into forestry, they're under the age of 10, it's going to be a totally different world. But we need to start doing better at telling that story, and then also pulling them out of the cities. Stephen, you and I have talked about this all the time, is like, if we can solve this bridge, if we can build this bridge between how forestry can help, not just, that we can bridge the urban rural divide. What did you just hear in what Joachim said? Like, how are we going to get there?
I think that the way we get there is really, to me, it's the immediacy, right? I mean, all we ever hear is that the time to act is now. The time to act isn't in 10 years. If we think about how hard it is to even build and start projects in our province, in our country, the timeline to go for some of these proposals from zero to functioning and actually supplying energy is massive. The time to get a transmission line built for a mine in this country is 17 years. So I think that what we need to do, is we really need to focus on the immediacy of our solutions. And I don't think Joe is a unicorn. I hope that's not an insult, Joe. Unicorns to me are like, we have people who are doing really great work. It's really fascinating, but these are people who are trying to take ideas and turn ideas into technology.
I want to come back to something you said, Joachim, because Stephen's kind of dancing around it, is my fear, and perhaps it is yours, you tell me, is that what has ended up happening here is we're not actually having the conversation about the ease and the speed and how quickly this solution can be deployed, but it has become an us versus them. That instead it's become, is forestry versus hydrogen, forestry versus electrification. There's this versus kind of like Mario Kart thing going on, where really we should all be in the same direction here and actually having the conversation about the desired outcome, which is net neutral or net zero.
I think it's a little bit complex on that too, because you have the politicians who want to have the win, right? And they see as the hydrogen as the win. Well, we know that wind to hydrogen, you get a 35% efficiency rate, right? So you're spending all that money and all that energy for 35%, right? For us and our project, we're at 75. So we're taking wood to diesel has an efficiency rate of 75%. It's a no-brainer that government should be supporting us. But because we're diesel, they're like, oh, you're bad. Well, guess what? When diesel was invented, it ran on peanut oil. It was the first biofuel out there, right, in the 1800s. So that's the conversation that we need to have, is let's not chase the shiny squirrel thing over here, hydrogen. Let's focus on what we have, which is diesel. How do we greenify that? How do we make lubricants green? How do we make glyphosate out of my wastewater, which is wood vinegar? Those are the exciting conversations that we have. And Lakehead University is leading that charge with unbelievable vigor. But yes, we do need the academics to be involved in this conversation for the next level. But the immediate level is companies like us that have the solution for the future.
It's not us versus them. It's proven versus unproven. Like this is what it comes down to, right? It's like we're trying to box shadows. You have these shiny things that sound sexy, they sound exciting, but then it doesn't begin to fathom also the environmental impact of the windmills that will be used as part of these projects. There are numerous studies that show windmills being created of materials of questionable origin. The amount of concrete that's needed to even secure one of these things in the ground emits an obscene amount of carbon. And then there's the challenge of dropping these things in the water. There are some studies that show offshore wind farms kill right whales. So, we've had a federal government turn our fishing industry upside down over protecting right whales, but still they're clearing pathways to drop wind turbines in fertile fishing grounds. And so I think that this is not a question of us versus them. It's a question of proven versus unproven. Joachim's technology works. It's been tested. That shows. Joe's technology works. And if you want to talk efficiency, taking wood and using that to produce both heat and electricity is over 95% efficient. So again, we have 95, 75, 35. Which one of those do you take?
I guess the big thing that we need to do is the accountability component, right? We know that we're a negative GHG. We can prove it through Bright Spot. We've proven it over and over again. And so it's the dialogue of we're real, we're TL9, we can make diesel and stop. We can also make jet fuel. We can also do graphene. We can also do biochar. We can also do wood vinegar. We also can do lubricants. But we are TL9 and diesel, and we can be up and running and start building something here in Nova Scotia in 12 to 18 months with the right support in government. We can be up and running. It will take us about 2 years from that point. So 3 years, we could make 100 million liters of diesel with 130 people working in rural Nova Scotia, right? That is the fundamental truth of this story. We're not a unicorn, and we are reality. And so let's go. Let's giddy up. Let's make this happen, because Thunder Bay is all over this. North Carolina is all over this. Minnesota is all over this. We're going at 100 miles an hour.
So this is all good news. There are lots of courageous, visionary people like Joe and Joachim out there fighting the good fight, creating new solutions every day. And they are moving at 100 miles an hour. But there's still the challenge that the world isn't moving that fast. The bureaucracy can't keep up with the need for speed. And so a lot of the benefit of the innovators is being lost to wasted time and energy on things that just won't move the needle forward at all. In fact, that lack of support could result in guys like Joachim and Joe taking their operations elsewhere.
I desperately want Nova Scotia to be first in the sense of head office so that we have higher paying jobs here. But I can tell you, I'm happy to go somewhere else if there's better support.
And with all this said, dear listener, I still have some serious questions about how all this plays out in the public. Because if you ask Joachim and Joe about burning wood, they'll both say, fantastic idea, and one of the most efficient ways to use the resource if done properly. But if you ask the general public about burning wood, the association is fire. And fire is emotional. It's not logical. It's not reasoned. Guys, I can't keep talking about the sector unless we talk about fire. The very real threat it poses. The very scary way it makes us feel. We can't live with a forest without making peace with the fire. But when houses are burning and thousands of people are fleeing their homes, who's responsible for saving us?
Forestry Uncut is a podcast series produced by Story Studio Network for Forest, Nova Scotia, the largest, fastest-growing forestry organization in the province. Leave us a comment and a rating on the show, and be sure to share it with your network. You can follow Forest Nova Scotia on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. For more information about the work we do or becoming a member, visit our website at forestns.ca. Forestry Uncut is hosted and written by Aaron Trafford. Our senior producer is Becky Coles. Jen Hudson is our field producer. Our editor and executive producer is Dave Trafford. I'm Mike Trutler.
Story Studio Network.
We know podcasts.